Welcome to TrueWorks, the podcast that equips you to understand how the gospel can transform your life and your work. I'm your host, Joshua Smith, and with me is my co-host, Doug Meikle. Doug, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Today, our topic is kind of has a strange title, the Ships of Tarshish. Tarshish.
Is that exactly how they say it? I'm pretty sure that might
Tarshish.
not be. Tarshish.
Tarshish. You say that pretty well. You should have done the intro.
Yep.
And this is a piece written by Richard Mouw, a retired, I think he was president of Fuller Seminary.
Seminary, yeah.
Yeah, for quite a while. And it's one of my favorite articles and topics that we go through in the Faith Work Intensive, and I hope that you find it helpful to understanding what are the Ships of Tarshish all about and what they mean for us today in the 21st century. So, Doug, I have a quote for you.
You have a quote?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I have a quote for you. I want to use this. I want you to unpack it for me, okay? All right, here's the quote. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. This is by Antonio de Saint-Exupéry. Expura? Messing that up, but the quote is what we're after, not pronouncing his last name.
Yeah, Exupéry, I think is his name.
Let's go back to the quote, though, Doug. Let's go back to that. That has some resonance with you. Tell me about that.
I think, so that quote, how it resonates is on the importance of vision and the importance of purpose and the importance of having a view of what will happen in the future. And what he's trying to say there is that, folks have got a pretty difficult task on hand of building this boat, but what will motivate them to build well is a vision of the purpose of that building off into the future. And in actual fact, it really does remind me of the value of vision. I coach people in my professional life, the part that's not dedicated to TrueWorks. But I do some coaching, and oftentimes I coach along three dimensions, one of which is the importance of vision setting and leadership. And what you find there is that if you're going to get the best out of people at work, one key issue is, what is the vision for their work? What is the greater purpose of their work? And what you find is that folks will invest their time and energy in their work to a better and greater extent, first. And then second, also extract from their work greater satisfaction and purpose and meaning, if you can set for them a vision of the future that they believe in and want to invest in. And to some extent, that's what the quote's about today, about building a boat. You don't, the task at hand might involve wood and nails and pitch, but the motivation of that task is the building of the boat that will sail out to sea. And to some extent, I think that the point of all these things is that the vision that you cast of the future affects you in the present.
Exactly.
It will drive your actions in the present. And in fact, that'll be a thought that we return to quite often in the course of the Faith and Work Intensive, is that if you want to change people's behavior in the present, you need to cast for them a clearer and better and truer vision of the future.
And this vision of the future, we are finding that Christians actually don't know the vision of the future that the scriptures and Christian tradition presents to them of the ultimate future, the ultimate end, the ultimate goal of how God is bringing everything into this new heavens or new Jerusalem, how he's bringing everything back to himself in full consummation. And that is what Mouw zeroes in on. And he gets to it through kind of a circuitous route because he focuses on this passage from the prophet Isaiah, where it shows a picture of the new heavens and the new earth, what God is going to end up doing. And it lists all of the things that are going to be in this new heavenly existence. And lo and behold, there are these ships of Tarshish there. Now, Tarshish, that we don't exactly know what it's referring to, but what it is certainly doesn't mean is Israelites. Tarshish was a pagan nation, or a nation that was seen as having great technological advancement, especially in shipbuilding. And when Isaiah gives this picture, this prophecy of this is what the heaven is going to look like that your God is building, pagan, great, beautiful boats are there.
Yeah, that's a bit of a challenge. But I actually, before we get to that, I want to rewind a half a step, or maybe a full step, because one important part of this is also what the heaven that's presented to us here, the vision of the future, is not this ephemeral, only spiritual existence. It's something that has substance. It's something that has kind of this physical existence. And that's the kind of cool thing about the biblical story arc, right? Is that the presentation of the future is not something where we kind of just jump on a spaceship and head off, we're gone, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the old hymn, I'll fly away, is only true to a very limited extent. We're here on this earth. That's what, we're going to have to make a difference here, because this is what's going to be left. And I think that's one of the things about this short, fairly short article we're going to get you to read on the ships of Tarshish. That's perhaps quite important first to establish, is that, when we talk about the new heaven and new earth, we're really talking about a new heaven and a new earth, this earth. There is something that's being remade and reformed. It's not just simply something that will be consumed and discarded. And that's I think, a pretty important thing when it comes down to what's the relevance of my work today.
And this vision of this new heavenly existence, we can understand maybe how that begins out of the biblical witness, because there are some passages that talk about to be absent in body is to be present with the Lord, that He is going to bring fire and judgment. And so what we see, though, is that these select few passages get kind of morphed into relatively recent in Christian history of, that means that God's going to wipe away all the trees, all of the grass, all the animals, and we're just going to be kind of floating souls, worshiping in this kind of cloudy cathedral or something. I don't know. I mean, you can paint various pictures. You'll probably be playing a harp on this version of heaven, I think. Yeah.
I'll be one of those cherub-looking people.
A little harp, just a
a
tiny
small harp.
Yeah.
I'll be baby-like with wings.
Yeah.
I think that's...
Oh, gosh, this is getting closer to the other place in my imagination.
You don't
now.
want to go there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm telling you now, do not go there.
Thankfully, the Bible gives us a different picture than
Well,
Doug
hold on a minute,
just
though.
gives.
But actually, so there is a serious point there. We were making fun there. But where does that vision come from of what will heaven be like? It's actually more a product of the Italian Renaissance, of Michelangelo, than it is of something that we would get from the Bible. That vision of what heaven will look like, that really pretty much populates our minds, is not really a heavenly vision given to us by the Bible, or given to us by God in the Bible. It's really one that's given to us. It's an interpretation of that given to us by medieval painters, and which doesn't make them bad painters. They were great painters. But I think for us as Christians, we've got to figure out, where does that picture in our head come from? Because when you look at the pictures that are created in the New Testament in particular of what heaven will look like, what the ultimate goal of God's mission on this earth is, it's not to create Doug as a chubby little cherub with wings. It's something...
Thank God.
Yes, thank God for that. But something very much better and truer than that. And I think that's our first challenge when it comes to this Ships of Tarshish thing, is to get straight in our head that the vision we often carry around of what the ultimate purpose of God is, to create this new heaven and earth, that vision of heaven is informed by more by medieval painters or Renaissance painters, maybe better said, than it is from the vision that we see in the Bible.
Yeah, it's this priority of, or not even this priority of the spiritual, but this certain kind of constricted, restricted understanding of what spiritual actually means.
Yeah.
We see it in the early church as well, as the gospel is coming onto the scene and it's interacting with these other ideas, specifically with Platonism and a certain brand of Platonism, where the soul is the only thing that matters. The soul is the soul is not the only important thing of you. You are only the soul on this vision. And so if God is going to save you, the only thing there to save is the soul. But when we look at the scriptures, it actually, of course, the scriptures talk about a soul, talks about that there will be an existence after our body dies, but it's looking toward a resurrection of the body. But yeah, we have to look at the origin points in the Genesis of our idea of this kind of cloudy heavenly existence.
Yeah.
I think it's plagued the church since its inception.
Since its inception, yeah. And that's something that is since its inception, but still with us today.
Yeah.
Strangely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's one of the things we want to try and get you to see in this podcast and hopefully motivate you to go read this Ships of Tarshish book is, first of all, it could be that your vision of heaven that you carry around with you all day, every day, is kind of flawed. And that vision also is affecting how you interact with the world today. Yeah, interacting how you deal with the world in your daily working life or your life at home or whatever. But certainly that vision of the future is visions of the future don't remain in the future. They push back into the present and affect us in our daily lives.
Just like the shipbuilding. I mean,
the shipbuilding.
Their vision, the analogous heaven there, that their vision of what the sea was going to be like affected how they viewed their work, whether it was with meaning, purpose, how well they did it, whether you had to be on them with as a taskmaster motivating them, or whether they almost did it themselves.
Yeah, so perhaps it's worthwhile thinking a little bit about, okay, so what if heaven is not like those kind of cheruby babies, what is it actually like? And I think the first thing we want to say about it is that heaven, as it is expressed in the Bible, is a new Jerusalem.
The city.
It's a city, yeah. So it's not a city, I'm ashamed to say, like Houston. It's hopefully a bit nicer than that, but it is indeed a city. It's and what does the city represent here? It represents the created fullness of all the stuff that God has given to us here in terms of this creation, but also all He's given to us as human beings to be these creative things that can shape and form the world around them. The ultimate expression of that is the New Jerusalem, which God Himself ultimately gives to us. But that arc towards that is something that we can participate in and be a part of, it seems.
There's this kind of connectedness, this kind of continuity. The city is much more familiar to me, to us as humans, than baby cherubs floating on clouds.
Yeah.
And that's one of the key, I think, drives or motors that helps us see, okay, if our vision of what is coming is a heavenly Jerusalem, is a new city, then He's going to somehow take the things that I'm doing now and they're going to stretch into the future. That's going to be another really difficult thing for our listeners to get their heads around. I think we need to camp out here for a moment.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about that is how difficult that is for our kind of Christian folks around us to really get their head around that there could be things that they work on and create that God ultimately will use as part of the building blocks of a new Jerusalem. That's kind of a weird thought for many folks, I think.
Yeah, this cup is, this mug is a piece of craftsmanship. It had to be designed. It had to be molded in a certain way. And God delights in that creatorship. He sees it as good, and that somehow this mug that I'm holding in my hand somehow, admittedly mysteriously, but actually makes it into new heavens. That is hard. I'm drinking
Well,
heavenly coffee.
Well, maybe, or maybe the issue is more that there is a mug that will get to heaven. It might not be that one,
Right. Okay.
but there will be something that we as people can create that is so beautiful and true that it may exist in eternity in the New Jerusalem. And that's a pretty mind-bending kind of thing.
It is. Yeah, it's this shift from thinking of heaven as this otherworldly or other sort of existence to actually it's the existence that we feel here on earth fulfilled, though, like things perfected, not things completely separate.
Hey, you ever seen
different.
What's the thing that's on Netflix that's it's the biggest thing on Netflix these days? It is Stranger Things. Yeah, I don't know if you watched that or not, or where folks watch that. So Stranger Things, spoiler alert, there's a kind of a basic thing, part of the plot line there, that these kids that are in 1980s America gain access to this other world, and I think they call it the upside down.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the upside down in their sense is that they are able to enter into this world, which is the same world, only a world inhabited by less than human things that are malevolent sometimes in their nature. And that place is certainly like the earth that they are part of, but it's also a distorted earth. It's a distorted earth both in kind of purpose and meaning and inhabitant. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen that before, but it's like this vision of heaven is almost like Stranger Things in reverse, that we exist today in the upside down, and that heaven is almost is like the perfecting or the realization of this place as it was supposed to be. Yeah, so we live in the place that's kind of malevolent, that's not quite right. Yeah.
We feel it in our bones.
We feel it in our bones that this is not really what home is supposed to be like, but there is a place that is home. And I think that, and what we are offering here, I think, as Christian people is, it's almost like that step through into heaven, that you can live today like you're living on the right side of the upside down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's that's a great show, by the way, and I think beautifully acted and just so creative. And but in any case, I think that's an analogy that people might see about. Well, that's what it's like. Heaven is not this other; it's something that's almost like out of phase for the physics folks and engineers like me out there. It's kind of out of phase with reality. But if you get the phases right, then this thing pops, and it becomes real again and true.
Oh, that's a good illustration. I mean, this comes from these phrases also that we try to get at this, that we live in this already and not yet. Yeah. I think most people get the not yet.
Yeah.
That most people get that, yes, this is not everything that God has planned for us. There's tremendous evils that need to be redeemed, and there's restoration that needs to happen. What's the already? Like just things in my heart? Well, yes, God has renewed the people that he's redeemed. He's giving them new hearts of flesh instead of hearts of stone. But it's actually more cosmic than that. It's the things that we're making. It's in our very actions of work and creating and cultivating that God has called us all the way from the garden, and now he's going to complete it.
He gives us that mandate to go fill the earth and subdue it. And subdue it, of course, means bring it to its fullness, bring it to its best representation of itself. And I think that's, again, something that we've got to work hard as Christians to recover, that the work of our hands not only can it have meaning in the present, but it can have this kind of eternal meaning. And that's a real mind bender for most folks.
Yeah. It's certainly a counter to this understandable but where there's this complete discontinuity between
Yeah.
what we're doing here and now, even as Christians, even the good things that we're doing
Sure.
here as Christians, and what's to come.
And the other development in this particular text that we asked you guys to read, of course, is that those ships of Tarshish that are bringing back to the New Jerusalem all the best of the world are not bringing all the best that Christians have created. They're bringing all the best, full stop. Period. That's right. All the best. In other words, and this is a thing also for Christians as well that I think is pretty difficult to get their heads around, that it's possible that there are folks out there who are pagans that can create things of such transcendent beauty in their work, that those things last on into eternity, that they are aboard those ships of Tarshish, so to speak, being brought back into this great celebration of how God has recreated the earth. And that's just, again, an incredible perspective on our work here on earth that, that kind of, it expands the mind, I think.
It does. Yeah, one of my favorite philosophers, he says, Christian philosophers, he says, all that shines with the brilliance of Christ. There is no other light. The beauty that these supposed pagans are making, the beauty of their craft, even if they do not worship God, that beauty is God's, and God will bring that into New Jerusalem. That is no one else's. There's no counter anti-God beauty or anti-God good out there. It's all God's. But instead of glorifying that artist or glorifying the nation of Tarshish, it's going to glorify God himself the way that it was intended to. It's going to be properly set in its place. But it's still going to be connected to, someone who may have not known God or may have even rejected God, but because of the crafts of their hands, that thing will make it into New Jerusalem.
Shall I give you my awesome illustration of that?
My mind's already blown,
Yeah.
but I would like another awesome illustration.
So I use this illustration a lot, and forgive me and don't judge me, but went on vacation this year to Tuscany, and I'd been there a few times before, but the whole of Italy is really like this, and I just love the place, I love the culture, I love the people, but Tuscany is so transcendently beautiful that it figures and features as a backdrop to several different movies like Under the Tuscan Sun and The English Patient and several of these movies. So you've probably seen vistas from Tuscany before, and they're these kind of tear-inducingly beautiful places. The Tuscany was first settled 1,000 years before Christ. And some of the parts of it date back to that time. And
Wow.
that wild place that would be filled with woodland is now that created place where, they have those white gravel roads. They have the small towns that are sitting on hilltops, the farmhouses on their hilltops, etc. The vines, the olive trees, the grapevines, all those things have an origin that goes back 1,000 years before Christ when the Etruscans arrived. None of those folks knew of Christ. None of folks knew of the Christian faith, but the reforming of that place into this transcendently beautiful location began then. And that's the sense in which we participate, and even the pagan participates in something that God can knit together into this vision of this not just a vision of heaven, but the real heaven that that would be so transcendently beautiful. It would be the natural place for us to want to live. That's the goods, if you like, that are on the ships of Tarshish. The architecture, the cultivation, the good work brought back that all things might be brought together into this heavenly place where we can enjoy God forever. It's just an awesome vision of the future.
It is. It's compelling. It's attractive. We're inherently longing for beauty, and it links up to that quite naturally. And here at TrueWorks, we're saying that the Christian picture, Christ redeeming, is answering those deep, deep longings in our hearts for beauty, for cultivation, that we put so much time and energy in crafting these things. and God says, to the good, that shall be mine in the new heavens. But let's rewind again, because I think it's so hard for our listeners and so hard for us in our current moment as Christians to think of these things and making it into this new heavenly existence. You have shared many times of your favorite chef, Dario Cecchini? Cecchini.
Yeah.
Okay, Cecchini. And how his vision kind of heaven really reflects, I think, the vision of heaven that most of us have, of this otherworldly existence. And he says, hogwash, that's not what life is all about. Life is about here, and we, through the Netflix show,
Chef's Table,
we get a vantage point to peer into his life, and his life is so seemingly full. It is full, not seemingly. It is full. How are Christians supposed to understand that? Well, what do you do with that? Tell us a bit how you use that illustration.
Well, I think so. Dario Cecchini, you can go watch some summary of his life and his work on the Netflix show Chef's Table. It was in the first series, I think episode 2. Watched it a few times. And of course, it's set in my favorite place. I just gave you that illustration in Tuscany, Panzano and Chianti to be exact. And Dario tells a story of how through tragedy found his role as a butcher. So let's start there.
Okay, all right.
Let's start there. That role is the everyday blue collar role. Yeah, it's a role that. But in that role as a butcher, he had to discover, if you like, the calling and that his vocation in that role in order for him to do it well. And I think there's an illustration for the Christian in work. Is that, hey, discover the vocation in your work, and that will allow you to do the work well. And I think that's one thing, that's one element of that story that's really beautiful. The second thing is that when you do that, you start to see how that role, whatever it may be, that vocation, can allow you to serve the community in which you live well. And I think that's another element with in Dario's life. Is very clear that he serves the community in which he lives so well. And now he's got a worldwide audience, and also tons of people come to this little town in Chianti to go to his butcher shop, but also his restaurants. He's got 3 restaurants there. And as a chef, it's not these kind of cooking pyrotechnics. It's all meat. It's very simple cooking, the kind of cooking that you could do at home, and if you have the right ingredients.
And kind of models it after his mother or grandmother?
His grandmother,
yeah.
Grandmother's
cooking.
His grandmother's cooking. Yeah, so the whole thing there is just this beautiful experience of how one can find worth in one's vocation, how one can find meaning in serving the work, and also that we'll return to that later in this series of podcasts about how serving the work allows you to find meaning and purpose within it, but also by doing so serving his community. Mm-hmm. And the challenge, I think, for Christians watching this guy, I think is he's not a Christian. It's a real challenge for Christians, because you look at his life and you think, that's a pretty darn good life. Yeah. That's a pretty good life. And you think, what would the spiritual, and in some ways he is a spiritual man too, I think he sees that. But there's still, you got to ask yourself, okay, what would Jesus give this guy? Because his life looks so good and it's so well lived, and he's obviously a joy to be around. So, got to meet him this summer. And
I didn't know you had got to meet. Oh, yeah, what a
I got
privilege.
to meet him this summer,
wow.
And meet him. I say, give him a hug, shake his hand, and get a picture taken. It wasn't it wasn't a long discourse or anything like that. Yeah. But I did get to meet him. But he's a real hero of mine, just simply because of how he is able to live his life well and finding kind of this beauty and this, in some ways, pretty humble vocation. And it was just great to get to meet him, and it was great to get to be in his store, in his butcher shop, and also in his restaurant. So my family went there for the full experience. Yeah,
Oh,
full
but
experience.
that was marvelous.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And Karen, my wife, she's encouraging me to send him a little note because she knows how often he shows up in the illustrations that I have about what should work be like. And I just couldn't say it to him because I would get too emotional.
Yeah. But obviously he has something that's been very moving to you, but moving to many people. I mean,
he's made a big difference. And actually part of the thing though, what he challenges us Christians to think is you can have an abundant life now. And oftentimes we're in this dumb culture where we think of abundant life as abundant in the sense of having lots of stuff. Yeah. His life is abundant, not because he has a restaurant, not because he has a butcher shop, but because his life has found fulfillment in his vocation and task and his ability to serve the community in which he works. That life is abundant. Now, it turns out that that's been rewarded reasonably well, and he has a pretty good life there, of course. But the abundance of it is not in the things that he may or may not have. The abundance of it is in the serving that he does, both of his vocation and the community around him. And it's in that sense where what is it they have in over there, the local dish, huge. It's good we're doing this in Texas.
Quarantine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Bistecca alla Fiorentina. It's a huge steak that's generally 4 fingers thick, is cooked super rare. Even for Texans, it's cooked pretty rare there, it's traditionally. But it's interesting, will that make it to heaven? Can that be a work so beautiful and so pure and so true that transcends time and makes it to heaven? I don't know. Maybe that's a bridge too far. But the point is he puts all of his effort and work into that. That abundant life can start now. That piece of the renewal of heaven can be ours to own and to do.
Right.
And that's the real sense of what this piece is about, is that there's stuff that you can do now that can have transcendent significance. And we can give up to God the ability to take all those pieces and parts and knit them together into...
However that happens.
Yeah, and that's okay. We do our thing here and let God knit it together into the heaven that he is creating. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. If you can allow yourself to be a part of that, that's a great thing.
I don't want to leave our viewers hanging of what exactly Christ would offer to this inspiring guy, Cicchini. And I think the beginning of an answer would be something like this. Jesus would come in and see and affirm the good work that he's doing for the community, affirm that he is caring for the animal in the particular way that he does and using the resources and bringing the full potential and cultivation of those animals and cooking them in a certain way and selling them. And what I think Christ would leave him with is, but it doesn't have to end. I have come for you to have life and life abundantly. That's what Jesus tells us in the New Testament. And what we long for in these things of beauty is for them never to cease. But of course they will cease for Dario and for everyone else. And what the promise of this new Jerusalem is that those things in order to right under God can continue forever.
Yeah.
I think that's a beginning of an
and
answer.
I'm glad, I know that you've been thinking about that for a while, and I'm glad that you did, because people have asked me that question before when I've used him as an example, and they say, well, you're elevating this guy who's not a Christian, and that's not right. And there was something about that didn't seem right to me, but also there was a challenge in the question about, okay, so what would Jesus give this guy? And I think having a good answer to that, I think is important. Yeah, but also maybe I want to leave it with this thought. I think sometimes we Christians, we have too easily dismissed the beautiful work of the people that are around us just simply because people don't believe what we believe. And the fact is, I think sometimes that makes the God too small. Like God cannot use the work of the hands of others. And on top of that we would not recognize that everybody is created by God and therefore has the spark of creation within them. That allows them the ability to have great and true work. Mm-hmm. And I guess that gets back to the TrueWorks podcast. That's the TrueWorks show up not just from Christians, but from across the created order.
I think that's a great place to end our discussion of the ships of Tarshish and what will be in this new heavenly existence. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the TrueWorks podcast and discussing exactly what heaven is like and what will make it to the New Jerusalem and how that's going to affect how we live our day to day. I've been your host, Joshua Smith, and this is my co-host, Doug Meikle. If you want to find out more about TrueWorks, visit us at our website, trueworkshouston.org. If you want more podcasts that talk about this and other topics, our podcasts can be found anywhere that you can download podcasts. Catch us next time. Thanks again.